Good morning. My name is Tim Chen. I'm the chair of the Advocates for Immigrants in Detention Northwest Board of Directors. We have a unusual meeting this morning with the agenda. We will have 3 presentations trying to give you information about where we are today. Actually, a lot of things have changed. We will, just a little bit of housekeeping, we will have a Q&A session at the end of the 3 presentations. Please save your questions for then. It's a little difficult for us to keep a track of the Q&A in the chat and answer questions while we're in the middle of these presentations. Please be patient. We're a little new at this, even though we've done this, I don't know, 5 or 6 times. It's every time we do it, it's something new and something different. As most of you know, we have assisted the immigrants that house in the detention center in Tacoma Tide Flats. I don't know, it's been 7, 8 years now. We maintain a welcome center outside the, in an RV outside the detention center. We have a hospitality house where we have in the past housed immigrants for short, brief periods of time. We have a visitation program, which used to visit people in the detention center, now is mostly a letter writing type to people in the detention center. We have various what we call PDAN. These are people who actually provide transportation assistance for the immigrants. And 2 of our volunteers will be presenting today are part of the Speakers Bureau, which we used to, again, prior to COVID, we would go to, the Lions Club or those kind of things and do presentations. Obviously, we don't do that anymore. We have had a few virtual type sessions, but again, that's difficult. And personally, I find it very difficult. This has been a very unusual time for AID Northwest. In March 2020, when the COVID pandemic started, many of us had to change what we were doing. My wife and I used to volunteer in the early days of the RV every Monday. And so we did that faithfully for several years. Unfortunately, with COVID, we did not feel safe or comfortable continuing to work in the Welcome Center. So we've had to back away with that. Fortunately, others filled in, and we have, of course, a lot of our younger volunteers who are still immortal and invincible. So they've stepped in, which is good. For many months, the detention center was at a overcapacity of about 1,500 detainees. And over the months that reduced to about 200 to 300. And frankly, we, the board and others, were discussing what would we do if our mission disappears, if the detention center goes away. What do we do with our assets? We have a huge and strong volunteer base. You kind of hate you build it up over the years. What do you do with it if that whole mission disappears? That, of course, changed in mid-June of this year. Suddenly, Deborah and others started getting frantic calls from the volunteers at the Welcome Center. Suddenly, when we were going from 2 or 3 maybe being released on a daily basis, they had 10, 15 people suddenly show up at the door of the RV. Wow, big change. And that has continued throughout July. Shauna and Dianne will tell you a little bit more about that, but it's been a huge change. Formerly, in the old days, it was pretty much of an ad hoc, one-to-one help the immigrants. So you had that feeling of knowing person briefly for a few minutes. Now we've had to turn it into more of a assembly line, if you will, a process where we have different stations and where we process. When you're processing 30, 40, and 50 people, you just can't do it the old way. formerly, the volunteers had agreed to be there at the Welcome Center about 4 hours. That was the typical period. Now we're seeing people have to stay somewhere between 10 and 12 hours. In July of this year, Aid Northwest spent about $15,000 unplanned for travel arrangements, hotel stays, and we give them, the people who stay in the hotels, $10-20 for meals. Again, that was unplanned. The length of time the volunteers are donating at the Welcome Center is huge. Again, unplanned. And of course, as most of you probably know, when they arrive at the Welcome Center, they are wearing the clothes that they were wearing when they crossed the border, which if they came from the South is typically jeans and a t-shirt. So our, snacks, backpacks, coats, and so on, literally are flying off the shelf. This is a really different situation. We are adjusting. We will continue to adjust, but obviously we have to look at a different situation. How long will the situation go on? I don't know. I've given up trying to predict the future. But I read a report the other day that said the U.S. Customs and Border Protection arrested 200,000 people at the southern border in the month of July. 19,000 of them are unaccompanied children. 76,000 are parents and children. That's a huge number. I believe that my understanding is that the overflow, and Xiomara will speak to this, but overflow from the southern detention centers are being sent up to us. The folks here are typically only here for a few days before they're released. So it's a dramatically different situation. The question is, will it stop? Or do we have to plan for this type of volume for the future? I don't know, but I think all of us have read the news about Haiti. We have a significant number of people from Haiti. There's nothing better about Central America. Those folks are in deep trouble. Venezuela, Colombia, and we don't even have to talk about Afghanistan, Myanmar. So the world is in a troubled place, and frankly, we are very fortunate to be citizens of this country. I don't want this to be a downer. We do good work. I consider myself privileged to be part of the organization that's helping these folks. We help folks in a very difficult time. We also have our challenges as an organization, and this is what we'll have to make some adjustments now and going forward so that we can be sure to raise the volunteer base that can support this volume, the donor base in both money and also support, backpacks and jackets and so on like that. As a side note, please remember that 90% of the folks that come out are men. So donations of that pink little backpack with sparkles is not going to work. So please don't do that to us. We would just have to store that someplace or donate it to somebody. Anyway, so we will start now with Dianne and Shauna. They are both volunteers with our Speakers Bureau, dedicated volunteers that have worked very hard to promote Aid Northwest, and they have a brief presentation. And I think, Shauna, you're going to start with the PowerPoint presentation. I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Timothy. Let me share my screen here. Okay. Are you seeing my screen?
Yep, we are now.
Okay, wonderful. Well, we like to start our presentation with photos. These are some examples of mostly older, actually older photos of what has been happening with Aid Northwest at the Hospitality House and the Welcome Center and the visitations, and as you can, with all the in-person contact before COVID. And eventually we hope to get back to this kind of being able to interact. As Tim mentioned, right now it's restricted, of course, but eventually, you know, you can see all the different ways that AID Northwest volunteers are connecting and supporting the immigrants from the detention center. And along with photos, you'll be seeing some more updated photos throughout our presentation. We like to share the photos because we feel like, you know, sometimes photos can speak louder than words, but we also, when we can, we like to share the words of the immigrants themselves and sharing about their own experience in the detention center and with our programs and with our volunteers. And I do have an excerpt from one of the pen pal letters that Tim mentioned. Our visitation volunteer program now is mostly writing and also keeping in contact via phone. But this is an excerpt from a letter from one of the immigrants as they were getting ready to leave the country, and just really kind of raw, but truthfully telling, you know, their own experience and what a difference it made to have the volunteer visitation program. So I'll just start here. I'm not going to be here past this week. I already went to my immigration kangaroo court and I should be on my way out of this country next week. Yes, it is difficult being in this place. No human being should be in here. This is an evil place. For one, no one should be deprived of their liberty if not serving a criminal conviction. Two, the judges have already made their judgment on our moral character without even knowing us. And three, their decision is likewise already made before we even start our proceedings. The coldest and cruel part is that they give us a false sense of hope, making us think we have a chance to stay in the USA. I can only speak for me. When I was very young, I made a mistake and it cost me half my life in prison. I have no problem being held accountable for my bad actions. These people talk and behave as if they never made a mistake in their lives. Anyhow, I paid my dues to society day for day. I should be a free person in the country I claim as my home and where I built a life and have all my memories. Being subjected to this now is like a second trial for the same crime. This is double jeopardy. I'd like to take the opportunity to thank you and your wife for the volunteer work you do. Because of people like you guys, I hang on to the hope that one day the human race will unify and help each other, not divide and destroy one another. It was great to have made your acquaintance. I appreciate you taking the time to write me. I wish you the best. We can just sit with that for a minute. And let's see. Okay. So also just wanted to get a little bit more into the core services that AID Northwest provides. And Dianne will be sharing a little bit more in detail about the update of how all of these core services are currently being provided, some of which Tim also got into during the introductions. We have the Welcome Center right outside the gate at the detention center, which is ICE Processing Center, as it's called. The visitation program and phone access while the immigrants are in detention. And then PDAN, or the Post-Detention Accompaniment Network, of providing transportation and accommodations once they need to move on. And then the Hospitality House, which is also houses the AID Northwest office, where Deb Cruz works. And then also providing referrals to community partner organizations for different assistance as needed. And here you can see this photo is the setup right outside of the gate next to the Welcome Center. So we just did want to also mention some statistics to get some idea about the numbers that we're talking about serving that is so much increase over the past couple of months. As you can see, during July, the immigrants served at the Welcome Center was 295. And that is actually several times the number that have been served at the Welcome Center previous to that. So it's really rising fast. And there's, as Tim mentioned, there's just a lot more need for volunteers out there to help coordinate everybody, all the needs of them as they move through so quickly. Also transportation, we're looking at 138 people provided with transportation and hotel rooms, and host homes also being coordinated for some of them. And then also mention of the letters, and that's through the visitation volunteer program and backpacks. And then a huge number of volunteer hours served in July. And by comparison, only the first week and a half of August, the Welcome Center already serving almost as many as for the entire month of July. And we're still, in the first half of August. So just the numbers that we're looking at serving so quickly right now are really rising fast. And I wanted to turn this over to Dianne to talk a little bit more detail about these services and how they're changing.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Yeah, the numbers are astonishing, aren't they? And when you talk to the ICE officials and you ask them, wow, is it going to end? They say, we don't know. And they have really turned themselves into a processing center too, which has been a change, a growth opportunity, let's just say for now. So you can see the RV, and you can see the volunteers, the hours which have been extended at this point. Sometimes we finish early, but not so often, depending upon how transportation and scheduling goes. So you can sort of see the things that we do there, and it's been mentioned before. Okay, so next slide. This has a little more details. These pictures pretty much portray what we're seeing, and the stations that are set up to work with folks when they come out. Yeah, you'll see we're practicing social distancing as much as we can. These folks have been pretty crowded together, as you can well imagine. And most of them, if not all, have come from the southern border. And this isn't the only detention center / processing center in the country. It's a privately run, ICE oversees and GEO runs that private prison industry. But they are being shipped all over the country to various centers from the southern border. We take them to the train, we take them to the buses, we take them to the airport. And I'll mention briefly writing letters, as we've already been mentioned before. I am still in contact when we used to visit inside. I am still in contact, and I can say her name now, Florinda. And she is home with her children, 4 children in Minnesota. And I have some pictures on my phone right now of her daughter's quinceañera. So it's lovely that she is out in the world and doing what she came here to do, which was to work and raise her family in a safe environment. And you'll see pen pals needed. Just a brief note, I now have a pen pal, 2 pen pals actually. And it's very moving, really, to the letters they send, and Shauna alluded to that. Some are more moving than others. I have one, and this lovely young man has written quite a long letter about why he's there and what happened to him, and included a picture of a cowboy that he drew with crayon. And it's just darn sweet. Okay, next slide, Shauna. So I'm doing this now. I'm part of the PDAN. I did it before COVID. And when Deb called for volunteers, I said, holy smoke, we need people to be driven places. And they do. And we take them, like I said earlier, to the bus stop, which is very close. And we try to get them on the express bus to the airport whenever possible. But often we take them to the airport also. Just a quick story. We don't get to know folks like we used to, when we were at a different modality. And so I took 2 Cubans and a Venezuelan person to the bus stop, and they'd been down at the southern border for a long time. I don't know how long they had been there. And then here in our center for maybe a week. But one of the fellows needed a cigarette. And he asked me, I don't speak very good Spanish at all, but we figured it out, if he could buy a cigarette somewhere. And I said, there's no place there to do that. And there was a fellow looked kind of like a homeless person, but maybe a person traveling somewhere. He had a lot of boxes on a cart. And he was standing there, and the Brazilian wanted to know, this was a Cuban. He said he wanted to ask him if he could have a cigarette, he'd buy a cigarette. So I helped him with the negotiation, and he the fellow didn't want any money for this cigarette. He just wanted to give him one, and he did. And I explained to him, you know, these folks are new to the country and they're just got out of the detention center. They're immigrants. And the fellow, the homeless fellow who gave the cigarette said, "This is a freedom cigarette." So lots of beautiful things happen along the way on these journeys. Okay, next slide. Oh, sorry. You know, sorry, that was me spaced out. Hospitality House, not much to say. Currently closed, no residents, although you do see the garden out there, which is kind of wonderful. And you can see that we're currently looking for a part-time live-in host coordinator and a part-time office assistant. And there's Deb's contact information, which you'll see again here in just a bit. All right, next. And so Deb, I think you can take it from here. I love this picture, by the way. You ready,
I took
Deb?
that photo.
Did you? It's a
Yeah.
great. It's a
I
great
said,
photo.
everybody say Libre. And so they all threw up their hands and said Libre. Yeah, so that was actually talking about the numbers at the detention center. I mean, coming out of the detention center, that was the day that 59 people were released. So, you know, we were still then didn't even have as many volunteers as we have right now. And another volunteer and I were there for 12 hours. So that is, you know, it's a big need. We need Spanish speaking volunteers. If at all possible, unless you know, and you don't have to speak perfect Spanish, you just have to be able to ask them, you know, little questions. El puerto for airport, you know, like where are you going, things like that. And we do have some laminated sheets in the RV that have simple phrases on them if you're comfortable using those. But we do really need Spanish speakers. So anybody that speaks Spanish and is interested, please contact me, and my email address is there on the screen. We also need drivers, like Dianne said, taking people to the bus, sometimes needing to go to the airport, train. We take people to the airport if they, for example, have a flight in 2 hours and they need to get there. If they just are not comfortable riding the bus, and sometimes there are people that, you know, just say, I don't want to ride the bus. So then we get a driver to take them there. We currently only have 10 drivers, so we definitely need more drivers. The shifts now have changed so that people are not working as many hours. They are 1:30 to 6:30, and then from 3 to close. And some people are working 4 to close. Most of the time they're getting out of there by 8 or 9 o'clock, so it's not as bad as it was in the beginning. We are working directly with ICE to make that happen. They've been very helpful, and I send the messages if, you know, we haven't seen anybody like 3 o'clock and nobody's come out. We've been there since 1:30. I can send a message inside, and then the ICE officer will go to see what GEO is doing, because GEO is actually the ones that release them out. So that's been a lot of help. So pen pals, I think they talked about that. Yeah, that's a great service, and people really appreciate people writing to them. So if you're interested in doing that, that's another volunteer opportunity. And then we are hiring part-time live-in hospitality house coordinator. So that person would live in the house. And then would have to be available from about 4:30 or so till about 9:30 at night. That would be the time that people would be bringing people from the Welcome Center to the house. So we'll have maybe, you know, I'm not sure how much space we're going to have available for overnight guests, but we will have some room for them. And then we will have some room for people that need a little bit longer stay. we work directly with World Relief. So if we have asylees come to the house, then they come in and they talk to the people and get them set up on their programs if they've won asylum. And just a note about that, there's not a lot of people coming out on asylum right now. So so most of what we will have at the house is overnight or a couple days until they can get enough money to fly out. And then I am looking for a part-time office assistant, 20 to 25 hours a week, Monday through Friday from 11 to 4. And that is mainly because, well, I've had interns in the past that have worked in the office, but as you know, they can only be there for maybe 3 months and then they're gone, and then we have to retrain. So luckily the board approved a permanent position. So if you know anybody that's interested in doing office work, and I'm fun to work with. So also if you can speak Spanish, that's another good a good fit for the office, because you would be working with some of the people in the house as well, helping them with transportation and other things. And a lot of people do speak Spanish. So we are 100% sustained by donations and grants. So if anybody wants to donate monetarily, you can send the donations to our address there on the screen, or on our website. We have several options: PayPal, Karma, Benevity, different ways that you can donate online. We also have an Amazon wish list. And that's on our website. You just go to donations and then you search for the Amazon wish list, and it's over here. Okay, so the website's over here on the left. Yeah. And also we are right now, we've gotten a large donation of snacks and drinks from someone at World Relief. So we're good with that for now. But we are still looking for backpacks and jackets. And there's other items on the wish list too that we need. But jackets are really a big thing because, you know, I mean, people come out and it's starting to get chilly out at night, and, you know, we want to be able to give them something to put on so they can be a little warm going to the airport or wherever else they're going. So again, if anybody's interested in any of those opportunities, just send me an email and I will get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you.
Okay, are we finished?
We are, thank
All
you.
right, thank you. Thank you, Shauna, Diane, and Deborah. Next is our Xiomara from the Northwest Immigrants Rights Project. She is one of the staff lawyers. She has been working with the organization for the last since 2020. I'm sure she knows everything about everything and anything you ever wanted to know. All yours, Xiomara.
Good morning. I definitely do not know everything. And just like you, we are having to adjust constantly and every day because we are thrown with new challenges. But I'll briefly explain who we are and what we do. We're the Northwest Immigrants Rights Project. Our whole purpose is to provide representation to both non-detained and detained individuals. We do not represent every single person that's detained just because it's impossible based upon capacity, but also based upon legal relief. Not every individual will be able to have a process so that they can fight the removal proceedings. So in terms of what we are seeing currently is, as you are also seeing, we're experimenting these waves of individuals coming back and forth that we hadn't had in the past. The detention center has been historically pretty booked, pretty high, and this was the first year that it was very low in numbers. However, as you guys have experienced, those numbers went up really, really, really quickly. And now we find ourselves overwhelmed as well. One thing that I want to explain also about my organization is that aside from representing, we also provide legal orientation programs to individuals. So there's what we call a hotline that individuals can call any day of the week, either morning or afternoon. Tuesdays and Fridays we're closed in the morning, but aside from that, we're open both morning and afternoon. And the purpose of this phone calls is for them to provide us information so we can assess their case and let them know what possible legal relief we may see. Sometimes we take some of those cases in-house, and others, if we see that this could be suitable for a lawyer that not necessarily practices immigration law, or he does, but in a pro bono basis, then we go ahead and refer them as well. So that's how we determine what cases to represent. And currently we're seeing away from the South, but we also have away from the North, which during COVID was impacted because a lot of individuals who had some sort of status in Canada were not allowed to go back in because of COVID. So that was very unfortunate for many individuals, and it was very surprising how Canada treated them, many asylees. So I don't know what else could I provide about who we are.
Thank you, Xiomara. I should also mention that we have AID Northwest has a long-term relationship with Immigrants Rights Project, NWIRP. We provide the funding, which their lawyers actually then provide to the detainees in the detention center for telephone access. This year we budgeted $8,000, and looks like you will have given out more than that. So we're discussing whether we can supplement that to get you through the end of the year. I don't imagine any of us can imagine how difficult it is to be in there and not be able to talk to your family or friends or contact anybody. And it's, well, it's expensive. It's a private organization which has the contract to provide service. And even though for most of us calling is very inexpensive, in the detention center is very expensive. I did also want to point out for those who may not be familiar with where that detention center is, you notice from the pictures, the area around the detention center is industrial. There are no services down there for anybody. There's not a payphone. There's not a 7-Eleven or anything. So when you're there and released, there's railroad tracks, there's industrial buildings, and that is it. I guess I'm sorry, go
If
ahead.
you want, I can answer a couple of questions that I see in the chat about our services.
Why don't you go ahead?
So the way that individuals know about our services is because when an individual is served with what it's called a notice to appear, which is what exactly starts the whole process before the courts, they are also provided at the very back of a document that says free legal services. So within that list of providers, NWIRP is probably the first one to show. Indeed, there are not that many here in Washington. The Northwest Immigrants Rights Project is the largest organization. We have 4 offices, and we are distributed among the whole state. So that's how they know about us. And what we do is once there, we have record of who has been detained. So we put them in the server, and then we send them a message with our phone number saying, hey, we would like to talk to you and do a legal assessment of your case. If an individual has already retained an attorney, then we cannot move forward because that would otherwise break the attorney-client privilege. But if they're not represented and they would like to be assessed, then by all means, we go ahead. We are providing the telephonic orientations. So, and we do have several videos, both in English and Spanish, that are constantly being shown, or allegedly that's what they tell us, that they're being shown. I'm actually the one who shows them the video. So I'm sure that some of the detainees are pretty annoyed with my voice by now. because it must be a recording. So those are the two things. We do have also a line that is not free of cost for us, so that the call is not recorded, because that's the other thing, right? That we have to keep in mind, that not only these individuals are deprived of their liberty, but even in the phone call, it's being recorded. So whatever they say to a family member, somebody else may hear it. And when you're dealing with legal proceedings, and you definitely want to have that confidentiality. So the number that individuals can call us from the detention center is 2779#. That's what they dial, and it's free of cost. And it shouldn't have a time limit, but we've had fights with Geo about that, because sometimes they put a 45-minute cap. No, cell phones. This is jail, right? So the only difference between a jail and this place is the fact that here, no individual is there because of criminal proceedings. They're being detained there because an ICE officer who does not have a legal permission, who does not have much of a training, to be honest, has determined that he, she, they are not suitable to be free in our societies. Are these calls very judgmental? Very much so. I can attest to the fact that I see many more African or Black individuals than other colors when they come, for instance, from the airport. They detain them far more than they would detain a white person by far. So we're definitely seeing those patterns as well. And so cell phones is something that, while they're detained allegedly, they will eventually, if released, they get them back. The reality is that many times that property gets lost or stolen, right? So that's it. So right now, we're not even allowed to go. The question is, can you tell us if support people, family volunteers are currently allowed into immigration court at Northwest Detention Center, or they might be allowed in the future? So it's been a really bad situation for all of us, because not even as attorneys are able to see our clients. So sometimes you have to talk about very personal, difficult matters, and there's not even a room where you can do that. In the past, we had these offices where you'll sit with individual and go over their case one-on-one. Now we're using these spaces that were normally occupied by family members. So it's just like in the jail, where you have a glass, you have a telephone, and it's very inconvenient, because if you're working on a computer and then you have to hold the phone and the other person has to hold the phone, and it gets even worse when you don't speak the language of the other person. So for instance, I speak Spanish and French, but I don't speak 100 other languages that they may have inside. So we cannot offer the same interpretation services that we would if we were on the same room, because we just can make a phone call and get that interpreter. And the same thing goes for when you have a court hearing. It's unfortunate not to have the family and the community support, because we all have to be mindful that a judge is still a person. So psychology plays into every single court hearing. And when a judge can see that support, he or she, it's obviously impacted by that. And currently, all I can do as an attorney is stated on the record, Your Honor, there are so many individuals that would like to appear. Your Honor, there are so many individuals that would like to testify. They can do it via video or telephonically, but that's about it. And indeed, the master calendar hearings, which is the first type of hearing that an individual has, we cannot show. That's how limited we are. Is there a risk that our Afghan aliens might end up in detention? Yes. So we've seen planes and planes and planes of individuals leaving in the past days. Most of them are going to be placed in what is called expedited removal proceedings. So the United States has this, I call it very troublesome practice, that instead of many times deciding to let a person go through a due process and determine whether or not they should have this legal relief, they say, no, you just came through the border. We're just going to send you back. And we're going to do it in an expedited way. We're not going to give you a due process of court. So what they do to mitigate or pretend that the system was fair is establish what's called a credible fear interview. So an asylum officer, again, who's normally very biased and not very well informed about the conditions of the country that the person is coming from, will make an assessment about whether or not they consider that this person will have a legal relief. If the person does not articulate properly the reasons why he, she, they are here, they may fail that credible fear interview. Or for instance, it has happened so many times that I see an individual who is from the LGBTQ community and they don't feel comfortable disclosing that to an asylum officer at the border. And then they lose that right. They have the chance to get a review by a judge, but in 90% of the cases, the judge is going to just defer to whatever the asylum officer at the border determined, and then they just get kicked out. Nothing else. That's the end of the story. So it's really unfortunate. And what we advise our individuals who are in that situation is to, if they're gonna try to return to the country, to always be mindful of doing it through a port of entry, meaning through a bus or one of those places that has an inspection, instead of just crossing the border, because that will carry otherwise criminal penalties. I'm concerned about the local. Are the detainees tested and have they provided vaccines to the residents? So detainees have been tested because we sued them over this matter. We wanted to make sure that detainees were getting a vaccination process, and also that they knew if they had the virus. So as a result, they now send a list of not the individuals who tested positive, but rather how many have tested positive per day. And that is the reason why also the Department of Health tackled into this.
Dianna Torres is here from the Department of Health too, so.
Perfect.
She might want to talk on that. If anybody else has any more questions for Xiomara,
Xiomara, there's one at the Q&A for you.
I'm sorry?
There's a question on the Q&A for you.
Look at Q&A. Oh, here. Are the detainees who are the only at the DC a few days going through court hearings, other legal processes? Yes. So in every case, if an individual is
Xiomara, you're muted.
I'm sorry about that. So I
I
was
saw
saying
you
that-
waving your hands, but
I apologize about that. So let me restart. Yeah, so individuals who are released will continue their legal process outside of the detention center, even if it's an expedited removal proceedings, and they will have to show at an ICE check-in. And if they have a hearing coming up, then that hearing gets changed from a detained court to a non-detained docket, and that may take years. But yes, they do follow up with that legal proceedings.
I don't see anything else. Why don't we let Dianna Torres talk to us? For those of you who may or may not know, the health department has parked an RV outside the release gate. And they actually are screening the detainees as they're being released. I have read the reports, and apparently some are being picked up and taken to quarantine at a hotel in Centralia, I believe. Anyone? Dianne, you're up. Oh,
Hi.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're fine. Thank you all for having me here. So I am Dianna. I work with a nonprofit called Comunicativa. It's a nonprofit that was launched earlier this year. And we have now partnered with the Department of Health. So individuals who have tested positive inside the detention center, unfortunately, ICE is releasing these individuals who've tested positive in the middle of their isolation and quarantine period. And so the Department of Health stepped in to make sure that we are able to provide them, partnered with me, to ensure that we have community health workers there to talk to these individuals. One, make sure that they understand that they've tested positive. Some of them are aware. Some of them, most of them are aware. Some of them don't understand how they could have tested positive. So we're having to explain what it means to be positive and asymptomatic. And then we work with them, ask them if they have local family members, if they have any sort of way that we could reach out to somebody here locally so that they can finish out their isolation period, because they're unable to travel until that isolation period is over. And if they don't have anybody here locally, then we offer them the hotel that the Department of Health has established for those individuals. And so they'll get, my org helps them with travel arrangements. It helps them with securing airport to the travel to the airport. If individuals, as Xiomara was talking about the cell phones, there are instances in which they don't get their cell phones back. And so, or they get their cell phones back and their cell phones are destroyed. And so in those instances, my org is helping provide them with a cell phone and a month of service so that they can get a hold of family. Yeah, literally this morning I dropped off an individual, and so we help them through that process, because sometimes at the airport, the only thing they have to travel at that point is a blue identification card. And so some TSA agents aren't familiar with that. And right now with there seems to be a lot of new employees in TSA, it creates a little bit of a pickle. It doesn't allow them to get through. So I experienced that this morning with an individual, so we help them through that process. They get it, what Deb was talking about is very true, right? They sometimes only have the clothes that are on them, the sweats. Some of them, they don't get a chance to change into actual clothes or any clothes I don't know what's happened to their belongings in the course of this time. And so they come out in the sweats that they've been given by ICE. So when Xiomara says, it's like a prison, and there's the only key difference there is who's managing this prison. It's a privately owned prison. And so individuals deciding who imprisons these individuals. And so they come out with the sweats and the slides that are given by ICE and GEO in there. And so they're provided with changes of clothes, socks, shoes, all that when they are at the IQ hotel. I'm going to actually do a really quick share of my org and kind of what we do. It's the state health department. So there's two questions. The first one is, are the detainees who are only at the DC a few days going through court hearings or other legal process? So I think that one was for Xiomara. So this other one is, from Julia, is the state or county health department that you're working with. It is the state health department that I'm working with. And then let me do a quick screen share. So this is Comunicativa, and it's a sus órdenes means at your orders. It sounds so much better in Spanish, I feel like. So what we're focused on as an org is essentially leveling the playing field when it comes to social justice and equity. And so why is it that we do what we do? Why do we serve? So I work off of analytics. So I target the work that we do off of analytics. And so I don't know if anybody's gotten a chance to take a peek at the 2020 census data as of now. And something that I think comes, because it's not just immigrants that it recently released immigrants that I help. It's a larger scope of Latinos. And there's this really fun fact in there. It's not a fun fact at all, but it's data stating that it's projecting kids that are kids today. What is their probability of living in poverty if they are children of parents who currently live in poverty, right? And so this is, I think, the cycle that we all know. Most of us are older, decades. We can say we have a few decades under our belt, right? We know that this cycle, unless there's a drastic shock or change to the system in which we're in, it's not going to change. And so I'm looking for alternative ways to make sure that the next time a census comes out, this number actually looks a little bit more equitable. So when you look at it, the one for 2020, it says that specifically for children of Latinos who currently live in poverty, this is just a small little anecdote, 68% of those children are likely to graduate. And that percentage is almost 20% lower than that of all races combined for those that have a medium living wage. And only 19% of those children will actually graduate college. Now, if you take that same data point and you include all races for those two same data points, the numbers are 71% of children who are children of parents of all races who currently live in poverty. 71% of those children will graduate high school. 28% of those children will graduate college. Still not anywhere where we want to be when you look at when you start to raise the poverty and go to, medium and high and all that when it comes to income. So there's the website. It's called the opportunityatlas.org. It's the one that has all the data compiled from the census, 2020 census, and you're able to go in there and heat map and actually drill down to the communities that you live in to identify some of this data. No surprise, a lot of some of the data points, it doesn't give very specific when you get down to cities, because the participation of Latinos, it was not as great as, while it was better than previous census, it's still lower than what it allows for the data to get very specific when it comes down to a city at a city level. But when you get to county and state, you're able to still heat map those things. So this is kind of what drives me when I see, this, when there's numbers put behind the reality of what we know exists. So who we serve. So our primary focus is Latinos who've recently immigrated, or immigrant farm workers living at or under the poverty level. So that's who we serve, our demographic that we're seeking to serve. And then there's three, how we serve. It's what I call the equity project. And that what falls under the equity project is anything and everything related to immigrants that are recently arrived. Also the farm workers. So that's the equity project and how that plays out there. Then I have a language justice project. And so that project is focused on getting information to individuals that speak different dialects in their native dialect. And then also partnering with other nonprofits to hopefully in the next 5 years establish some sort of system that allows these individuals to be seen as qualified interpreters at a state level, so that they're able to accompany a lot of these individuals who speak a different dialect to be able to get healthcare help at schools for their kids, just more than just what it calls for at a court setting. And then there's the mental and physical well-being project. And so that one is really trying to look at what are some of the barriers that are preventing individuals from being able to get help, therapy, mental health, whatever it may be. And that what in the initial findings of what we've been doing is we're realizing that there's not, I think sometimes there's this notion that there's a stigma against getting mental health support in the Latino community, and it's actually it's not that at all. It's they're eager to seek out help, to talk to someone. The challenge is finding a counselor, a therapist who is culturally competent enough to help them in a way that's appropriate for them and how they live. And so the focus from IRGR specifically will be to get to how do we remove the barriers for individuals who are currently studying in that field to allow them to finish. How do we increase that percentage point of 17% of those individuals who are graduating with degree? How do we increase that? Because those are individuals that have the lived experience that are wanting to get into those fields. So it takes a little bit more work that way, and it's longer to get things done. But it's getting down to the root cause of things to solve at the root level. And last one, let's get to work. Very similar to Aid Northwest, we are fully funded through with grants, volunteers, donations, and contracts that we're able to secure with different state partners, as well as other nonprofits that we work with. And so a lot of individuals ask, you know, and I was really conflicted in launching this nonprofit. I have partnered with Waste Connections, the shredding division of Waste Connections, to provide hygiene kits for the detainees that are getting released in their male and female version. And you know, part of it, when I'm going in there to have these conversations about how do we get funding, to you, do you have a website, do you have a Facebook page, where are you on social media? And I become really conflicted with this part, because while I know that that's going to be really important for individuals to have visibility, for those that are wanting to donate, those that are wanting to do things, it's really important to be able to see those things. For me, it will hinder me from being able to help the demographic that I'm trying to help. Reason being is because it gives visibility. Those individuals that are in the demographic that I'm helping, which are at the poverty level or below, who speak a different, a Latino dialect, if you will, or who only speak Spanish, they're not seeking help, an organization's help, by visiting a website, by checking Facebook. They're asking their community, who do you know of? How is this possible? Who can I reach out to? And so my efforts to market this organization have been on the ground, bootstrapped, going to events that I know that they're going to be at, door knocking on trailer park homes in the most rural areas of Mason County, Thurston, driving out to Timbuktu to have conversations with individuals that I know are key community members, because they're individuals that are that what I would call a unicorn. They're seen as a unicorn, like they made it. And talking to these individuals about my organization and what I'm doing. Again, I know I'm doing it. I'm going about it a way that's a little bit different, and a way that's a little bit tougher to do. However, I know for a fact that I'll be able to impact the exact demographic I'm trying to get to, by getting the word out that way. And so they'll have my number directly. I have an 866 number now, so they're able to call the 866 number. And so, yeah, so that's how we're going. So as of right now, it's a very one-on-one kind of connection point.
Deanna, you have 2 questions in the Q&A section. Do you see them?
I did. I had to stop sharing to be able to see him. So
Okay.
I see. What COVID test does the detention center use? So they use the PCR test. I want to say it starts with the B, and I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head. Binox PCR. So I hope that's Catherine's question. So I hope that one answers that question. The other one is, where is Comunicativa located out of? So primarily my work is in Thurston County. However, the reach of the support that I do is in Lewis, Thurston, Mason, and there's some areas in the state of Idaho that I'm working on branching out to, because there's a farm worker base out there that's needing some help. Virtually right now, some of the assistance does reach out to Central Washington with the help of some nonprofits that are working in that area. And so at some point in time, grow in those instances, is in those areas, I should say. Also, since you were working with the people testing positive for COVID, do you know about detainees being hospitalized due to COVID? So to the question, no. I've only been doing the direct work with the individuals being released from the detention center. And at this point in time, there's not been any individuals, any detainees who have been hospitalized due to COVID that I'm aware of. It's not to say that it's not happened. It's just not, I'm not, to my knowledge and my awareness, it's not been something that I've come across. Second question is, do you have any idea how many are getting seriously ill? Also, no. Based on the information that we're able to get, we only get a notification of how many positive cases there are, and because they're having to disclose that information. Unfortunately, it's not, even when you work with ICE, and I think Deb can attest to this, even when we say we're working closely with ICE to try to get as much as information as we can, It's like literally trying to hug a porcupine. That's the best way I can describe it. And don't get us wrong, we walk away with like, we're hugging, we're clinging onto that porcupine for dear life. And we know we're going to be scarred from working with this porcupine. Deb's laughing because it's so true. We know we're going to be like scarred from working with this porcupine, but that's honestly, that's the best analogy I can use of how this works. And we literally have to, is incredibly hard, even as a community-based organization, even as, and I'll call it out, Deb can help be a partner, and we could say that she would have white privilege. There is no white privilege when working with ICE. It's a whole different beast, and they give us the bare minimum of information that they absolutely have to. There's been responses when we ask about things like that. They say, I'm not legally required to give you that information. My legal requirement is to notify you of XYZ. Any other request, if it has been done by anybody in the past, it was because they were being kind. And they're very clear about that. Because I'll say, well, you know, that information was shared with us prior. That was somebody trying to be kind. But legally, we're not required to. So
Yeah,
I will
you really have to know who to talk to, because yeah, some of them will share, some of them will not at all. So, and I just wanted to touch on that a little bit. A lot of that problem is because there's such a disconnect between ICE and GEO. So, you know, ICE is telling GEO to do this and that, but then they're not doing it. And then they're hiring new people and they're retraining. And so these people don't know what to do. Just like Dianna and I were standing there talking to ICE. I arranged a meeting with the Department of Health and ICE, and she says, well, you know what, sometimes some of the packets are all mixed up. So they're not putting paperwork in order. You know, so if we want to see like, oh, we want to see what their COVID test was, it's buried where, you know, they're just not, they're not organized, I think, you know, enough. And so that's part of the problem. So it's, yeah, there definitely should be something in between them that makes it a little bit more cohesive, but that's not the case. So
Xiomara, does NWIRP get information on who's tested positive in the detention center? Do you get any of that data?
We do not get names, but we do, however, get numbers. So they're legally required to let us know on a daily basis whomever tests positive.
Okay.
So we do get the judicial order on a daily basis. And what we've seen, which is very, very unfortunate, is that the number of guards is significant. I can attest to the fact that when I have to go inside the detention center because it's crucial for my work, they do not comply. They do not comply with their proceedings in terms of wearing the masks, of being mindful, being thoughtful. It's a constant struggle with them in those terms as well. And they particularly dislike our organization because we have, well, sued many times.
So they'll give you the staff and the detainees. What percentage?
So it's a judicial order that establishes the number of individuals who were tested positive. And in many instances, we also get information about if they were transferred from another. So it establishes how many were transferred from point A to here, and they were positive while it was transferred. Then it also says which ones have tested positive despite not being transferred in the past 2 weeks. And then it also states the number of guards that have tested positive.
Okay. Is there a significant number of guards?
Yes. Unfortunately, I would say that every day there's at least 2 or 3, which I don't understand how is this possible in terms of, I think that if they were more concerned about protection, it shouldn't be that high, but I'm no expert either. So I'm here just speculating. It seems very frustrating though.
Well, let me ask a question. I assume they send them home when they test positive, right?
Yeah, again, I'm talking about something that it's beyond my knowledge, but yes, I assume that they go home. However, I know that one of them almost died not long ago. So, and these are the individuals that they put at the front desk. So,
Excuse me. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Another reason not to visit in person. All right. Uh, thank you very much, Dianna. Are there any other questions or comments from the attendees? I don't see anything.
So
There, I don't know if you touched on this, but somebody asked if they're giving vaccinations inside.
So some of them are getting vaccinations inside. So, and Deb could probably help answer this one. So when we're doing the question for the individuals, I do a quick questionnaire, you know, do you want to be vaccinated or are you vaccinated? Are you vaccinated? Do you want to reverse order? Some of them actually already come vaccinated from wherever they're coming from. Others say that they did get the vaccine, but they're not sure which one. They don't have a vaccination card. And it's nearly impossible. It's impossible. I would say it's not nearly. It is impossible to get any kind of record of that shot for those individuals. We've tried for a few. And then we offer them from the Department of Health standpoint, we do offer them the opportunity to get vaccinated. We ask them if they would like to be vaccinated, but then let them know that it won't be until well after they've finished out the quarantine period, their isolation period. Some of them have opted for that and to do it at the tail end of it if their travel isn't immediately after their isolation is over. Others have opted just to ask for resources in the state that they're going to be able to get vaccinated as soon as they arrive. But so it's a hit or miss. It's not consistent either. Delia Flores asked, how can we support your efforts? What I can do is in the chat, I think I still have the chat function. I will include my email. So if you want to email me and I can add you to my email list, and I can send that out to anybody who's interested in wanting to know more about how to support my efforts. I can send out an email with that and then make sure that you guys get on the email gesture list. Yeah, right now we're really focused on the work. And I probably at some point should acquire a development officer. Sorry, that was my phone. Me gusta andar de pelo suelto, which Gloria Trevi key song. Gotta add a little bit of lightness, smile somewhere in my life. But yeah, so I'll include it in the chat real quick.
All right.
Can you
One
also
thing I wanted
include
to add-
the 1-888 number?
Yes.
Thank you.
Xiomara, you had something?
Yes, one last thing I wanted to add is in terms of what individuals can do for individuals who are detained is that when I'm having to file some sort of legal relief, one thing that I always need is community support. So if you have the time to develop a little bit of a report with an individual, say through pen pal or by phone calls, and then you can write a letter saying, I know so-and-so, I've been speaking with so-and-so, he's a good person, or like even I'm willing to provide $20, whatever it is, but something in writing that I can present to the courts, it's always super helpful, particularly if the individual writing it is either an American citizen or a legal permanent resident and establishes so in the letter.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, chats, comments?
There's a Q&A for Dianna. Dianna. Oops, you're on mute.
Okay, so approximately how many released detainees test positive each day? It varies. So I would say on average, let me do quick math here. On average, I could tell you a weekly number. So 4, 3, 2, 7, 9, roughly about 9 individuals test positive per week. That's the average. And so I just did really, really rough, quick math. So about 9 individuals per week test positive. There's been instances in which we have individuals where it's just 1, 2, And then the most we've ever had test positive that come out in a day, I believe it was eight individuals that tested positive.
So using Shauna's number that we have seen 200 some odd releases, 260 some releases in the first 2 weeks.
Mhm.
We're talking about a fairly small percentage then.
Well, it's
I-
total since we've done this project, we're up to 70, it's almost, I want to say it's 79, 80 individuals
Right.
that tested positive. So if it's 200 and something, we're roughly about 30%. What is that? 30% of the individuals being released are testing positive?
Well, but that would have included July too. So we had almost 500, 600 people since July. So it's not
Right.
quite, it's not quite that bad. I
Okay.
actually am not sure why they're being released. Why aren't they keeping them?
That's the same thing that I know that the department, so the Department of Health was asking, the Department of Health was able to secure a nursing facility inside to be able to do the testing and that kind of stuff and do the checks for the individuals. But that's about as far as ICE would be willing to go. I don't understand why they're releasing, none of us, we don't have answers to that.
Xiomara, you have any ideas on that?
Yeah, so ICE is the first group that makes a custody, what we call a custody determination. So they have the right, unfortunately, to make that redetermination on daily basis if they so desire. What happens often is that we file a parole request. If that parole request is granted, then the person is going to be released whether or not they have COVID. But also, again, that custody redetermination is based upon this new memo from the legal advisor for ICE. And so what they do is they try to allegedly only have detained individuals who meet the criteria for priority of detention, and they try to reassess that. So it is my understanding that when they do that reassessment is that they start releasing individuals, and that's why we've seen such a large group, because there's a large group of individuals that do not fit the criteria for priority detention. And that's where we are kind of wondering, why are they taking the trouble of transporting them from the south border here when they already know at the south border that they're not a priority for detention? So what is this really about? We're puzzled as well.
I was puzzled. Why spend the money?
It makes no sense because they're being released within days. So why are they pushing them all the way here? Is it because they already have a contract with GEO that they're losing money? Is that what is it? Or why?
So
Yeah.
I'll share so the individual that we worked with today who contracted COVID, he was a little bit different than other scenarios. This individual had already been in the US 5 years, got pulled over in Texas because he had plates from Louisiana. So he was there for work. He works in construction. So he got pulled over, got detained, he was there in Texas, and then he got flown out to Washington just to be released. And so he has no traffic violations. He has absolutely nothing. His car insurance, everything was up to date. Everything was perfectly fine. So it seemed his scenario is odd. Why would they detain him? They made it a point to not, move him over, and he's from Honduras. And so Honduras, Ecuador, and another, can't remember who else, has agreement that if they get detained, they cross them over and put them into Mexico. They didn't do that to him. They actually pulled him to a side and said, you're not going to be part of that group that gets deported to Mexico. Pulled him to a side. And then asked him, can you get us the name and the number of where you stay at? They even gave him his phone to be able to look up that information. He gave them that information. And then at that point, made arrangements to fly him out to the Tacoma Detention Center, only to then release him. Doesn't make sense. Don't understand it. Couldn't explain it to you.
I would have
And
to
now-
agree with that. That's a little bizarre. And so this gentleman who probably lives in Texas has to get back to Texas.
So he he lives in Louisiana.
Louisiana. Oh, okay.
So he's flying back out to Louisiana. From Louisiana, he's actually, because his job was great. His job was like, when you get back, when this ordeal is all over, we were all frantic to find him because he was on his way to a job site and then just disappeared, what it felt like, from the face of the earth. And so his jobs said, you know, we have a job for you. Actually, his job works out of multiple states. They say, we have a job for you in Houston when you get back. So when he gets back, he's going to move to Texas.
Houston. Right. Okay. All righty. I believe that's probably a wrap for today. Thank you all for attending. Thank you all, our panelists. I greatly appreciate. I guess I'm still more confused than I was at the beginning. Who knows what our friends and family at the U.S. Customs and Border Protection are doing. It's pretty unbelievable. Anyway, thank you all for coming. We will
Thank
post
you,
this on our.
Tim.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye,
you,
everybody.
Bye.